Welcome to this segment, and in this segment we are going to talk about the processing devices. I'm excited to have you on board, and we have been able to walk a journey in terms of discussing computer hardwares. We started with the input devices, we talked about the output devices, talk about storage devices, and then finally we are talking about the processing device. Now, this processing device plays a very vital role because all these components you have talked about in the past, they cannot be meaningful to us without the processing device. So each one of them plays a role of bringing data to this device we are going to talk about today. So talking of the input device, it just accepts data and then convert it into a digital form, but it is not possible for it to process. So talk of the storage devices, not able to do any other thing, just to store. Talk of the output device, just to display. But who does all this? Who does all the processing part of it so that the user can be pleased to see whatever is being displayed on the screen? That is the processing device that we want just to talk about right now. Now, the processing device is the central processing unit. So this is one of the vital tool that is found on our computer system. Sometimes they refer to it as the brain of the computer. So the brain of the computer because it's the one that handles all these aspects you're talking about. Talk of control, talk of calculation, comparison of logical operation, talk of storage of data waiting to be processed. So all this information you have to be talking about, it's just done by this tool or this component called the CPU. Now, where is the CPU found on your computer? The CPU is embedded on the motherboard. Why is it so? Because these data that have been processed using this tool must be transmitted from one component to another. And in order for the data to be transmitted from one component to another on the motherboard, it must have what you call the interconnection with what you call the data bus. So there are many data bus that fetches data from this tool to any other point in our computer system, and that's why it is embedded on the motherboard. Yeah. Now, an example of the of the CPU, you can see we have got the external architecture. So this is just the external architecture. So once I pull this CPU from my motherboard, this is how it is going to look. This is the rear end, this is the back end of that particular device. So it has got some diodes there, and then you can be able to see how it has been aligned so that you can be able to process data effectively. Now this side is just like an architecture to show how the CPU is arranged. We have what we call the control unit, and basically the control unit does all this issue of decoding, encoding, and fetch and exit, and many other things that it does. So control unit is all about that, decoding, encoding, and fetch of instructions. Then we have got what we call the arithmetic logic operator as another component of the CPU. Basically it does the comparison of logical operations. That's the comparison of logical operation. Then we have the registers. So we have got the program counter, we have got the instruction registers, we have the accumulator registers, we have got the memory address register, and so on and so forth. So these are just examples of registers that are found within the central processing unit. Why do we need registers? Data before it's being processed is supposed to be held somewhere. And as I said earlier, that what you're trying to solve is that we are trying to reduce the loss of computer time. Therefore, data cannot be held outside the CPU, and then you expect your computer to be in a higher speed. That's why we need them. We need these registers here to hold temporarily the set of instructions as they await to be executed. And that's why we need the memory unit in here. Good. Now going further, let me just go ahead and discuss those components very fast. Now it is regarded as the brain of the computer because all the processing activities are carried out in this device. Now when you talk about the central processing unit, we have what we call, the first component is what we call arithmetic logic unit. Now the ALU is used to carry out all the arithmetic logical operations in the CPU. So all the arithmetic and logical units, operation is supposed to be carried out using the CPU. Now these arithmetic operations include addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now logical operations, When you talk about logical operation, you mean comparison operations. So comparison operation basically talks of things like you're comparing one value or two value or more values. So comparison aspect of it. Okay. Now control unit plays a very vital role, and you can see in terms of hierarchy, control unit comes first. So these are some of the things that control unit does. It coordinates all the processing activities in the CPU. Now, when you talk about processing, it starts from the issue of input, storage, and output operation. All these operations you have talked about before must be controlled or must be coordinated in the CPU, and that is the control unit, the work of the control unit. Now, another work of the control unit is to determine which operation or instruction is to be executed next. So that is the process management, to determine which process came first or which one has got the higher priority and how can you be able to execute them. So there is some kind of, it uses the system clock to coordinate all this activity, to determine which one is supposed to be given which resource and for how much time. So it uses what we call the system clock to do that. So a system clock basically sends the electronic signal at its means of communication. The number of pulses per second determines the speed of the processor. So the more pulses the processor makes, the better the speed. Okay. So the faster the clock pulse, the faster the CPU. Hence, the faster the computer can process data. So the control unit fetches, I've already talked about this, it fetches, decodes, and execute instructions. Also the issue of encoding, it can as well be able to encode data, decode data, fetches, and execute. Those are some of the functions of the processor, the CPU, the CU, the control unit. Now the other component that is made up in the CPU is what you call the register. So a register holds one piece of data at a time and are used in the CPU. So a register is a temporary storage location that hold a single instruction or data item. Okay, so we have said that in order for us to reduce the wait time in our CPU, we need to have a temporary storage location, and that is the register. So it holds the data temporarily and it waits for it to be executed. Examples of this, we have what we call accumulator register. It holds temporarily the results of the last processing step of the ALU. So the previous executed assignment is being held in the ALU through what? The accumulator. Then we have the instruction register. It holds temporarily an instruction just before it is interpreted into a form that the CPU can understand. Holds temporarily the instruction just before it is interpreted. So once the instruction comes into register, or maybe it comes into CPU, and maybe the CPU is working on another instruction, now the instruction register will be able to hold that instruction awaiting to be processed. Then address register, it holds temporarily holds the next piece of data waiting to be processed. Okay, the next piece of data waiting to be processed is supposed to be held in the address register. Then we have the storage register. It temporarily holds a piece of data that is on its way to and from the CPU and the main memory. So the data that is that it's on its way out of the CPU and or into the CPU is being held into the storage registers. Okay, so talking of registers, that brings us to the end of this tutorial of processing device. So we have been able to talk about what a processing unit CPU is all about. We have said that this is the brain of the computer. We have also talked about the components that is made up, or the components in the CPU. We have talked about the control unit and its functions. We have talked about the ALU and its function. We have also talked about registers and its types of registers and how and their functions in this component. So thank you so much for watching. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel so that when I create the next content, you'll be informed. Bye bye for now.